Let's do one last example with this graph, and that example is example number 6. We want to find the limit as x goes to -1 from the left, as x goes to -1 from the right, as x goes to -1, and then just g of -1. In this case, as you look at your graph, if we're traveling on the graph from below, as my x value gets closer to -1, my y value gets closer to 6. It's approaching that point there, the point -1, 6. As you move along from right to left, as the x value gets closer to -1, the y value also gets closer to 6. So both from underneath and from above, as we're approaching -1, the limit is equal to 6. So the limit, regardless of direction, is also 6. The nice thing about that point there is that when you plug in -1 into the function, the closed circle, or the point that we get, is the point 1, 6. So g of -1 is also 6. In other words, the answer to all of these is 6, because the graph goes up to that point, hits that point, and then comes back down, moving left to right. We'll see that graphs like this at the point -1, 6, or at an x value of -1, that means this graph was continuous there. Whereas at the x value of 2, which we saw in an earlier example, the graph was not continuous there. But in this case, we get 6 for all answers. Let's write that down. So writing down what we already know, as x travels toward, as the value of x gets closer to -1 on the graph, the value of y gets closer to 6. From the left, it does that as well from the right. And that means in both directions, we get limit of g of x is equal to 6 as x travels to -1. The nice thing about this graph is that g of -1 also happens to be 6. Like I said, that tells me something about continuity, which we'll learn about in a subsequent section. So this is how we can take the graph of some random function or some crazy function and look at it and determine what the limits from the left, limits from the right are. And we can also determine things like what's the limit from both directions and what value does the graph take on at a certain x value. There we go.